lai zhu jue yang den sung zhu da rai che re zhu nyun mo ni long le ji chang zhu zhu zi jing ma ri mun se le tu nga lai nyun go chi ni chun ze ral ji nam de ne da jin sa ju tar su ne yun de lun zo jal se tu hu ju cha ju dan ju ni gen de da le mun se jang be yang la du om arabazana de 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 om arabazana Omarabazana de zeden keje kenraba usreji dal timo mimba rasayne Kadang ten ju shung lu tong pa yi lo zhi po pe nang wa zal do yi so lo kang ce da wa ran de pa ham chung se zhi wa ran de na yang gong bo jam yang ken ye ne ge me pa yang tong wa rai shu Ningzhe chimbe tsude ningme shen sung neme lam chimbo ngabja da penwar dangan sendo shermen do dunpa tukje shen na chaksa lo unjen son long penmen dongbo le jalwe namro rangshen hunje ro zenzo peche yunden tsoparo wa penma chungne dalwe pezero luchuk tome arya dewa dang ingning chongrang chungge chakpe sha yunde yue dan shanje yue lang so genjo chongne namla solwa de ma yu senge kange rikwe me sedere long ni changzeng kun se jang chambe pa juru tu zere kunye pa rongsum chukye sambo jajuru
Gonda, vi känner Muchima. Vi känner Kikiga som Gonda. I just wanted to pin him so I see his face better. Oops.
단다 뇌 오면 제제 인계 보정네 드슨 산제 군제 오니 랑슨 쪽으로 무슨 돈제바 자외 남매 샤다 소로와데 대양 조와 남기 타단년 베심제 탐제 두마리 균den이 단달데 톱잘란남에 바양다 버조비 산제지 고방을 보체라 고바르 지wo 디치도 담비치 되니 신지 출신도 냠술람바르 지wo 냠베 삼바 창조 쇼도 투게 바림보제 살다베 권네 심바라이쇼 강 심바르차비 추기 림바네 케비출라 주비 고시 차비 텐조 디니 임바레 딜라양 케비네 주 추기 dom시 되는 소소 양답베 리바시 권네 슝데 체기 요발레 당보 케비네 주의 갑라인 딜라양 풍보라 케바스 풍보들라 에나양 되네 나 수기 풍보 조리 풍보 아니 두시기 풍보 두지기 풍보 넘버 10 풍보 쓰는 데 예배 나네 다 데릭 두지기 풍보 갑라 lep테요.
At the beginning of class, please give rise to bodhicitta, thinking, may all sentient beings who are as numerous as the sky is vast be free of suffering and the causes for suffering, and may I be able to establish all of those sentient beings at the level of perfect and complete awakening, the ultimate attainment. And in order to be able to do that, may I study and put the teachings correctly into practice. So with that kind of motivation and the according conduct, please listen to the teachings. The text that we're studying in this class is The Gateway to Knowledge by Mipam Rinpoche, and it covers 3 main topics. First, the 10 topics of expertise. Second, the 4 seals of Dharma. And third, the 4-fold correct discrimination. Out of these, we're currently discussing the first, the 10 topics of expertise, and we're concerned with the first of these 10 topics, which is the aggregates. And the aggregates are divided into 5 aggregates: the aggregate of form, the aggregate of sensation, the aggregate of perceptions, the aggregate of formations, and the aggregate of consciousness. And yeah, Lasso.
So, tine da tambo tangong kasa de tiwa kashe yobale tine tiwa ji kande sungdusna tanda de chorwi kabla shemba tembe chorwa dang shemba meba munjung tembe chorwa sne ni lebido sna de chorwa nibo de dinde lege de kansa la rag lege dang tadi kande resne kansa rang so rag lege dang kande resne de sung ta de la lende la tenji wangi kone dine chorwa de la shemba tembe ane chorwa dang shemba meba munjung tembe chorwa sen de ni sharidu kansa ki ten chewe kone ten 시암 된 지위군이로 네 변나 심바 템바스는 되는 심바 되비 연대가라 심바 차바데 되게 된다고 지기도 선대 줘봐 아니 간데르스는 초로와데 되는 라페 세바 망보 지송나 근데 되는 라 세바 망보 이 제비 땡기 심바데 기 시암 땐다고 지기도 사디 임베는 심바 땜비 초르와스 다데 소소교게 셈데라 된라 되는 세바 양양 된 데라 차바 추 락도게 된라 차바 셈 세바 양양 제와라 땐네 안에 나 땐데도 가르스나 시암 땐데스네 시암 땐다고 지된데스네 다 차보로 차송을 될라 심바 땜바스 다 심바 미땅바스나 코르와 될라 되잉마 될라 셴괴 메바 아네 제가나 코르와 될라 셴괴 메바 코르와 데 닝부 메바 식투바와 코르와는 예전적 팍비 강사 남바 속이 되니 디류갑 될라 코르와 될라 양양 심바 메비 균세나 때네 심바 메바 문중 세대가라 내중당 내중비 삼바당 양답비 삼로 된중 원도 중투에게 된저게 양 시도시 용기도 사디다오기 세바 양양양 마제나 파비 남기 된데스 주마다오당 되네 닝보메바당 된데스비고니 내중기비고니 된데스네 삼로 디랩통나 되네 내중당 안에 코르와델라 내중 나소마당 최기 삼도 문도 중투에게 템보암 시도지 용에게 초바치기도 슬래드데 고니 니 샤르다 아니 딱 강사 제레라 라르게 요담 간데레벨라는 딱디 진데랑제 계속만 신치네 파피 강사 남신 딘데스네 람라 랍네 딘데 조통나 아니 셴바 템비 초르와데 용도 조 아니 심바 메바 문중게 템비 초르와생데 망도 조네 마티레 용기라더니 양 소소교 낭신치네 오늘 되는라 세바 양양 망보잖아 심바 템비 초르와생데 따오데스네 용기요레스 데 강사 제레라생데 맞죠.
I had a few questions again from yesterday, and the first one was concerning sensations, particularly the sensations that support clinging and are concurrent with craving for the 5 sense pleasures, and the sensations that support deliverance and are free from clinging. And the question was how to understand these 2 types of sensations, whether this is something that is universal for everyone, or whether it depends on the individual who experiences these sensations. And just to review what we were talking about in this context, we said that this kind of classification of sensation is in relation to what it supports. So whether it supports clinging or not. If it supports clinging, then this is an engagement with samsara, while if it doesn't support clinging, then this means it supports deliverance or liberation and the strengthening of renunciation. So here the sensations are divided into those that are the basis for this clinging or not. And sensations that support clinging are those that bring a lot of craving for the 5 sense pleasures. So if one is very attached to, or if one craves for the experience of the 5 sense pleasures, then all the sensations that come along with the 5 sense pleasures are the basis for more and more clinging. So it's a craving based on these sensations, a craving for the experience of the object is strengthened. And as one craves again and again for the experience of the object that is experienced as pleasurable, for example, then the craving and the clinging to these sense objects becomes stronger and stronger until it's very stable. So in this sense, the sensations that lead to the craving for the sense pleasures, they are the support for clinging to those sense pleasures. Now, on the contrary, when someone, like a noble being, has a very good idea of the fact that samsara is without an essence, that the engagement with samsaric pleasures is not true pleasure, someone who has really developed renunciation and engages in the path towards liberation, that kind of individual, then the sensations that person, that individual experiences are not supporting further clinging. They're again and again cutting through the craving for the 5 sense pleasures. The craving for the 5 sense pleasures is not what motivates them, but they can, their sensations lead to further and further deliverance, or to strengthen their renunciation and engage in the path towards liberation. Can you still hear me, or is only Lama? Okay, he's back. So that makes then the intention to attain liberation, the intention of renunciation, and so forth, manifest. And so in this sense, the distinction here lies whether the engagement with or the craving for the 5 sense pleasures and the experience of them as pleasurable, painful, or neutral leads to further engagement with samsara, or leads to the individuum to strengthen renunciation and the training in the path by a noble being. So the second one then reduces clinging, or is free from clinging to the sense objects. And yes, the question was whether this depends on the individuum or not. Yes, the sensations that are experienced can either lead to further renunciation when one knows how samsara is without an essence, how phenomena are without any lasting meaning in the sense, while for others, these experiences, when grasped to, when the sensations are grasped to, lead to further and further involvement with the five sense objects and clinging as such.
네, 아니 디젤라 된라 체마르 짐바당 된 düşedeler
Düşedeler döndangming.
Döndangming.
Döndangtanje.
Döndangtanje. Dönla 체마르 짐바당 dönla düşe바당 탄예라 düşebas인데 나 간대지 나스. 다 dönla 디 붐바오스는 디 붐바오 삼나 아니 디 dönla 체마르 짐바 dönla düşebas인데레스 디밍 디 붐바오 다 디밍라는 붐바 랍기레스는 밍데 딘데 랍기레스는 밍데 하고 해줘요 디밍 가브리가도 잘라데 통나요 밍데 하마고 되거라 밍하고와 당 된다하고와 얘기 개발되고 율하고와 당 밍하고와 율되기 밍율 붐바데 하고와데 된라 세마진바 붐바오스 베나 천장 몸보 세르보 삼바 딘데 당 아니양 지 타니에스디가라양 밍도지 천다 디 밍라네 세르보 천다 디도 독 디도지 통난 디 천다 디 밍라네 세르보 천다 딘데 통나 디 밍라네 마로레도 딘데 밍하고와 당 된다하고와 니기 개발.
The second question was with regard to perceptions. We divided, or one way of classifying perceptions was in terms of the appearance of the object, so the objects themselves, and then the other one was perceiving distinguishing features in regard to names. So on page 22 it says, furthermore, there are the perceiving distinguishing features in regard to the sense objects, such as perceiving an appearance as being blue, yellow, and so forth, and perceiving distinguishing features in regard to names, such as perceiving man, woman, and so forth as being such. So the question was then, how do we understand this distinction between the meaning or the object and the names, those kinds of perceptions of the meaning or the object and the terminology, the conventions, the names. And so the difference is that the first type of perception is just recognizing the objects of just recognizing, for example, the vase, or recognizing yellow, recognizing blue. So the object itself. And the second type then of perceiving the distinguishing features regarding the names, in regard to names, then this means that one doesn't only sees the object or perceives the distinguishing features of the object, but also knows the term for it, the terminology, knows the name. So the difference lies in sometimes we see something, we identify something and see the distinguishing features of something, like for example just blue or yellow or red, but we don't know how to name it. And the second one is then really to identify, oh, this is the color that is called yellow. So giving it a name too, identifying what this is, what name refers to the object that is perceived in this way.
네, 딱 된선나 거기다 가사갈라 조쇼기라 벤나 돈라 스마르스마스나 페나 돈 람나 페나 메델라 돈데 차신 책바여로 페나 추델라 돈데 간에 렌신 샤바여로 다 돈스나 디돌라 양 고알렌 추라 디 차신 책바오 메 돈다데네 차신 책바오 차신 책바리 아니 추데 장모를 롬바여레 서로 딘조양 돈라 스마르스마르와 다양 디 민라 추라기레 디 민라 메라기레 람냐 타nye 거기 민데로와 어디로 내가 된다고 망고여로 아마도 양변나 미지 차샤나 양 미디 모시나니 디 돈데 모시죠라고 양 미디기 민라 양 변나 미디기 민라 다시라기를 남나 미디 민디 셰바데 양 타nye 셰바도 다 타nie당 된스는 니니 되려도 민직당 된다지.
Another way to understand this, or another way to look at this, is in terms of recognizing the essential qualities of something, in the sense of identifying fire, for example, what it is as being, so experiencing and then perceiving the characteristics of fire, which are to be hot and burning. So just to identify, to perceive these distinguishing features of fire to be hot and burning, that's the perception of which distinguishes the features with regard to the sense object and its meaning. Or water, if we encounter water and we perceive the defining characteristics of water being that it's cold and wet, for example, then that is the distinguishing features of the object. While if we run into someone and we just recognize that person, that would also be the meaning, the object, identifying the specific characteristics of that object, of the person that we encounter. We recognize that person. While if we are able to say, oh, this person is Tashi, then we also here perceive the distinguishing features in terms of the name. So if we're able to identify that person in terms of their name, or or for any kind of thing that appears in terms of its name and label terminology, be able to say this is Tashi, for example. Awesome.
Yang di chela chiwachik di ta chi duxie tsema mebi duxie kolla keja sungi dorwa tsema mebi duxie ta pugu digi kolla ta de tsema mebi duxie de la naga sunzura shadwa duru dine tanya la mekebe ge tsema mebi duxie jik tang tsemme ge ing ge tsemme ge ing ge duxie tang size la nyumar chuge tsema mebas tanda de pugu da mishebe tanda tanya mishebe kola tiwashi tinamzwa tade tanya la mikebe tsema me pas tanya la mishebe tanya sanada digi ming rwa ane digi ming la dinde la pyores da de misheba rwa pena pugu chungji khangban nangla yona andi digi ming la ko la pire ane digi ming la kare kawa la pire digi mingla yola lapire sene ko mingde habu mara pu chungchung yena ngo du kapla ane di kawa di mingla kawa lakire di mingla ji kana go lapire sen dinde ki dushi me pas chema me pas chema me pa tanyela mikebe ane da mishibe gone tadila chema me pas ta dadang tanyela chema me pas bu chungchung lode tadi chema me pas dikala koi kola zimba di mingla kola presente kola zimba rwa kola ji modela so 거의 넘바로 거의 딜라 고 라게레 라이도 민기 넘바 쉬로 딜라 까와 라게레스네 까와기 넘바 까와 라게레 민기 넘바 쉬로 오 딘조데 미셰 바스나 단데 데 딜라 두셰메나 초라 락로게레베스 단데 송도 두셰 따드드 민기 두셰데 메레 다콜라 민디 민나 까와 라게레 두셰데 다 메레 민라 민기 두셰데 요마레 콜라 이나양 콜라 가르스나다 짜랑 오버든지 양 거의 통 되기로 와 까와 통기래 tumba 통기래 되니 강반은 고 통기래 고니 드에 임바데 디쇼라 동바 임바 강초 나나 도사 마임바 고초라 도사 임바 딘데 통니 고 고초라 드에도 딘데 강기 나나 마드에도 딘데 딱 거지 뭐 딘도 잘라든도 다 서로와 열에 통 되기래 이나 다 딘조 밍 디레 디레름 두시에데 콜라 메레스 다 밍데 디 밍나 딘데 라비레스 디코 두시에데 암 세마데 넘바 진예 밍기 넘바 진예데 다 메스 다 딘데 순
The next question was with regard to the perceptions without characteristics. And we gave 3 kinds of perceptions that were without characteristics. One was the perception of someone unskilled in conventional names. Then the second one was the perception of space without characteristics. And the third one is the perception of serenity at the summit of existence. And the question was with regard to the first one, the perception of someone unskilled in conventional names, which means being unable, even when seeing form, to name it because of not having learned its name. And the question was whether calling this the absence of characteristics, the perception without characteristics, whether this then means that the no characteristics of the objects are being identified at all. And the way that we have to understand the first kind here is in light of the perception, for example, of a small child. And a small child who hasn't learned the conventions, hasn't learned the names for things, cannot name them, cannot say, this is a door, this is a table, this is a wall or a pillar when being in the house. That doesn't mean that that child doesn't perceive the particular characteristics of these things, but it is not able to label them. It is not able to use the names for these things correctly. And so what is lacking here is the perception of characteristics that we've seen before, of being able to label them, of the names. But the child will still perceive the characteristics of the objects themselves. So if the child is inside the room, it will perceive the door and the wall and the windows and the table and the pillar, but it will not be able to correctly identify the distinguishing features in terms of names. So it cannot say this is a door, this is a wall, but it knows that the door is what we can open and walk through, while we cannot walk through the wall. So it can see those distinguishing features with regard to the object itself. In this case here, the distinguishing features of the labels, the names, the conventions is what is not applicable for that small child that doesn't know these conventions yet.
네, 모두네 두제기 풍부네 몸바라 두집이 생예천데 몸바라 두제바 다 두제기 풍부라는 데 네, 교총 망보 총네 제비 차네 두제스 유소 뭐 겐남 뒤신 총네 제비치를 뒤제기 풍보스 천년전스 디당시 지당기 풍보시래 신비 뒤제 탐제라 죄대 승수문의 풍보시 단다대 풍보가 있나네 단 뒤제기 풍보 많이 바신바 수 초로와 뒤시 안에 남시에서는 어디 시여로 어디 풍보 뒤시들래 아니 셴바기 최대도 탐제라 단다 뒤제 탐제들라 아니 단다 뒤제기 풍보스는 그 유스 풍보시래 신비 뒤제 탐제라 아니 죄대스 단다 뒤제기 풍보시와대 아니 대라 셈당 총딩기 뒤제 심중 승직당 심당 총딩기 뒤제 심중 시바직당 아니 총딩 민비 뒤제 생지 배샤샤나 토바 승직당 소 대면 뒤제 된조 대라 되네 뒤제 기 풍보선다 천시대 된조 인연선의 수마리도
If we now move on in our text, we are on page 23 and now we continue with formations. The aggregate of formations is defined as the act of thoroughly creating. It is defined as all conditioned things other than the four aggregates of form, sensation, perception, and consciousness. This aggregate includes the formations concurrent with mind, a cognitive act, such as the 51 mental states, and the formations that are not concurrent with a cognitive act, the so-called non-concurrent formations, such as acquisition and so forth. So formations are that which is defined as the act of thoroughly creating, or of something that is forms and conditions by many things coming together. And so when all the conditions, like it brings together all the different conditions. Now, this applies for the other aggregates too, but here the formations are specifically named this way as being everything that's not the other aggregates. So we have the 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, formation, and consciousness. And everything that does not fall into the categories of form, sensation, perception, or consciousness, that is then identified as formation. And this is illustrated then by a number of different things. The formations includes the formations concurrent with the mind, so the mental states. We have the mind and the mental states, and concurrent with the main mind come the concurrent formations, but also included in the list of formations are then the non-concurrent formations, which are not, they do not come along, they're not concurrent with the main mind, and so they're called non-concurrent formations, and that would include then things like acquisition or attainment. So that shows the range of what meant by formations.
네, 데라 셈당 총딩기 되제 셈중남당 선수물에 데라 셈당스는 조셈다 된다가 셈데라 에나 조셈직당 셈중스는 니여스네 데네 숭을도 데라 조셈데당 총딩기 되제 셈중남당스 총된스 총바 자우 냠도 덴데도 스나베다 데데 총바데 나샤야도 총바가 된스 총바 총총데 총바가 이거네 총기도 되네 총바 나데 된 왕보 총바 밑바 율 총바 아니 남바 진당 총바 제데 레레레레네 총바 뒤 다다와 총바스는 따디도 총바 나이군에 총교요스 데데도 갑라 데라 조셈 데당 총바 나이군에 안에 도바라 체긴기 데라 안에 심중스네 라교요스 심중데 총바 나된게 되지 심중당스 두제 심중승인데 조셈당 총바 나이군에 총교요스는 데 당보 된 왕보군에 총바데 조셈데기 왕보당 심중내기 왕보대 총대열에서 드라우레스 치바레스 율대한 총 밑바 율대한 총대열에서 니바데 밑바 조심대당 심중 두제 디니기 아니 심중대 심중 두제 그 심중 디니기 율대한 총대열에서 넘바 진당 자우대 대한 총대열에서 제 된조 제레레레레 깨지 제대 총대요. 뒤에 대한 냠도 인스네 되네서 총된 게 두제 심중남 베나 디 셈당 조셈당 세디가라 메기 넘버 셰파 나이 넘버 셰파 나이 넘버 셰파 젤레 넘버 셰파 류기 넘버 셰파 히기 넘버 셰파 디데 조셈레 셈당 레데 따디 조셈 디당 아니 총방아 이고네 아니 심중된저 두제 심중된다 냠돌라 유스 총방아 이고네 유스 베나 미기 셰파 데라 총방아 데 칸데스나 베나 ten ongbo chungba sen ta migi sheba de tang simjung ding migi sheba khordo yubi simjung dingi digi ane wangbo de chung deyos josem migi sheba josem digi wangbo de migi wangbo gu gyuni zugla ta go yore ane migi sheba gi khordo yubi gi simjung digi yang ane 왕보데 미기 왕보 다랑데 된 왕보 총바스네 데레스 미기 셰바데기 율 분발라다 위카데라 심중 된조 미기 셰바이 코르도 규베 심중 된조게 미베 율과 율대양 분바 다랑 인스 지바인스 데네 넘버 대한 분빈 넘버 컨텐츠네 증기 요바 다나신 넘버 다랑 심중되게 넘버 진당 총데스 분바 깨치 다가랑라 데네 짐비캅데라 아니 니가르기 아니 뒤천 제 분박의 제 코롱 분박의 또 디리샵심 초주를 둔 분박 코롱 제 가데 임바 다랑라 냠둘라 제 다랑라 아니 제 다가랑라 숭대여스 니자기 뒤에 다다랑 냠둘라 인스 다는 신게되니 지 나이 넘버 셰바 제 넘버 셰 류기 넘버 셰바 랑랑 소소 조심 된조 탐지기 코르도 줄바기 선중 된조 디다오진에 충방하던 게 거네 충대교에 선수만에 때때 연도가 다 심중들에 에와 가져여봐도 마오는 레게데 어테네스네 담응내라 단나디로 셈센다 조셈데 조셈센나 넘버 셰바 미기 넘버 셰바니 이기 넘버 셰바도 좋게 다 충된스나 충방나 있고네 충교여봐 되지 아니 두제 심중센나 심중된조 아니 디 코르둘라 충방아 이거네 거의 코르라 요바라와 다 디단직 양 셈스나 조셈스나 된기 모진바스 된 코롱기 모데 진바 빼나 분바 시베게 미셰데게 분바 낭점 분바기 모진점 아니 자와 조사래 다 디첼라 서기 분바레도 당 분바 야고도 당 메도 당 아니 다 분바데 간데 이메데 케바라 캐쳐데도 최상 하고인데 심중을 해서 네 인도가라 심중기 천이데 된기 케바라 짐바스 도제 심중기 천이데 된기 케바라 짐바스 되네 셈당 세리가라 셈 조셈데기 천이데 된기 뭐 짐바스 Dine 충den스네가 충방나이 보니 딘데스 도비여스 다 두제기 풍보데라 조sem당 충딩게 두제 sem중라빈직당 충딩 민비 두제 토바소 대면 두제스네다 dine 에원이라 치여스는 순간에도
We said here that formations can either be concurrent with the mind or non-concurrent. What does concurrent mean here? Concurrent with the mind. This refers to the fact that we, first of all, can divide a cognitive act or the mind into mind and mental states. So everything mental can be divided into mind and mental states. And these mental states, they come along with, or they're concurrent with the main mind in terms of 5 aspects, in terms of 5 points. There are 5 characteristics that make a concurrent mental state concurrent, and that is in regard to the support, the faculty, it's the same faculty, the concurrence in terms of the object, what is that which is focused upon, the concurrence in terms of the perceived aspects, the concurrence in terms of the apprehended substances, and the concurrence in terms of time, that they share the same moment, the present moment, as the in terms of that cognitive act. So in terms of these 5 ways, then the mental states are concurrent with the main mind. And so this means that the main mind and the mental states, they have the same support. They share the support for for their arising. So the support for the mind to arise, for the main mind to arise, is the faculty. The faculty, like the eye faculty, ear faculty, and so on, is the same for both the main mind and the mental state to arise. Then they also share the object which to focus upon, what they're focusing on. So the objects, the sense objects, and so on, the mind object. So that is the same for both the mind, the main mind, and the mental states. Then the aspects that are apprehended, that are perceived, are also the same. So to see or to experience the aspect, a particular appearance of the object, that's also similar. Then the substance or the makeup, the materials and so on of the object are also the same. So the substance that is being perceived. And the time is also shared between mind and mental states, so that they arise in the same present moment. When we talk about the main mind, we talk about the 6 types of mind. So we have the 5 sense consciousnesses plus the mind consciousness. So we have the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the body consciousness, and then on top of that, the mind consciousness. That presentation, the 6 types of consciousness, they refer to the main minds. And the mental states are then what is concurrent, that comes along with at the same time, and so on, with those main minds, in terms of these 5 concurrences. So the 5 things that are similar. If we just take an example now, for the I consciousness to arise, it needs a support. The support for the I consciousness is the I faculty. So in order to look at form, in order to perceive form, then the support is the I consciousness. And that is the same for the same support also for the mental states. The object that is being perceived, and that, yeah, the object then which is focused upon, which is perceived, that is, for example, then the vase. Some visual form like the vase is also shared by the mind, the main mind, and the mental state. So by the I consciousness and its concurrent mental states. The appearance of the vase, the way that appears, the specifics of shape and so on, that's also shared. Not only that it is a vase, but the appearance of it, the particular appearance of it, is also shared. And the momentary existence of that perception, in that perception of the particles, for example, that make up the vase, whether it's the particular material it is made out of, that's also shared. It's also shared in that cognition between the main mind and the mental states, and they arise at the same time, so at the same present moment. So with each cognitive act, with each arising of a sense or mind consciousness, a cognitive moment, then these mental states arise with them. The mind consciousness, the main minds, the primary minds, are then the 6 types of consciousness. The I consciousness up to the mind consciousness. And the mental states, they are concurrent with these 6 types of consciousnesses, in light of the 5 ways of being concurrent that we have just seen, the 5 points that are that make them concurrent with the main mind. So the main minds, like for example the I consciousness, are then what merely perceives the essence of the object. So seeing the vase for the vase, just recognizing, perceiving, apprehending the essence of that appearance of the vase. And then there are all sorts of other ways of engaging with that, or perceiving all sorts of other specifics with regard to that object. And that are then the mental states. So to identify something as good, bad, neutral, as being this and that, or as something pleasurable, painful, or neutral. All of these different kinds of characteristics that can be identified, all the specifics of the perception, then refer to the mental state. So the main mind is the mere apprehension of the object. Everything else, the grasping to any kind of specific, is what the mental states refer to. And so that's then meant with the concurrent formations. Concurrent formations are these mental states that are concurrent with the main minds in terms of the 5 concurrences, the 5 ways of being concurrent. And then in addition to that, there's another set, things that are not concurrent with the main mind, that do not come along with the main mind. And that are then the so-called non-concurrent formations like acquisition and so on.
네, 총된 민비 두제 토바당 아니 메다바 소 대면 두제 남소 스타디 개수는 게 넘바 토바 아니 개지기지기 결비 메다바 나소바던데 대면 두제 꼴라 망보에 데디디 마오네 레게레스 데리카블라양 사고치니 하고 비제 단다 대양 섬중 압주 나치 열라센다 단지 섬중 조섬디기 콜라 섬중지 열송라와 섬중데 총딩도 되게 섬중 근데 섬중데 장가지기에나 납중 악제 탐바 열스는 송말에 열라스 되네 따와가 소소르시나 납중 나나라 조기레스 따와가 따디가 마오나 지디 섬중 납중 악제 제디가블라 되네 따와데 따와 따와 코롱라 짜비 뉴몽 죽남네 되네 따와 스긴데라 양결 에와체네 따와 나데 도단디 강나 샤송나 아니 따와가 양결 에와체네 따와 나오데 샤송나 되네 맞중 앵아 차도 그래서 송알에 섬중되나 되네 요로스 섬중 다 섬중 맞중 앵아데 아니 강강 임바데 다 되네 말아양 림바 신도레 용데 당보 당보 간에서는 훈롱아 생지여스 섬중 맞중 앵아 남네 딱 섬중 따와 체나 나래 마체나 섬중 맞중 아체로와 맞중 아체 나네 당보 훈롱아 다 담ong아 지 섬중 맞중 아체 나네 당보 나 담바 기자식도 훈롱아 나긴 지여스 당보 훈롱아네 스타디 아니 셈레 중에면은 섬중세와 군도도세 셈여세 탐제기 냠도 조개베나 아니 군도도세 데다 군도랑나스 데니 군도가데 강강이 남나 셈바당 초르와 두시에 이라 제바 렉바 나 인사 다딩아오데레 셈바 초르와 두시에 이라 제바 렉바스는 어딘가부터 명라 군동아라 비례해서 숨을 군동아 인데가네스 다디나라가데라 초르드니 공도 시에선라선 단다디 초르와 대당 섬중 초르와 시와 대당 안에 두시에나긴 디니우데니 다야 강도 시에선 다야 강도 조선 가상 초르와선 랑도기 율라 랑도기 냠수 용웨 섬중지기 명라 초르와라게레스 초르와데라 뭐군이 에나 대화 동알 땅뇽시는 예스 양 신양 되네 지 코르도 조선기 코르도 도당기 공도 땅나 공의 셰바기 코르도 조기 초르와된 졸라 대화라게레스 이 동화된 졸라 예 되네 이기 셰바기 코르도로기 섬중 초르와 이도 옹와 용견된 졸라 이데라비레스 니제 되네 공의 셰바기 아니 코르도로기 아니 이드 명와 초르힌된 졸 명라 아니 동말라기레스 아니 이기기 셰바기 아니 코르도로겐게 되네 동말 용견될라 아니 이 메데와 쓰는 데라기레스 라이도 다는 신게 동안당 이 메디와 슬라이드기 되네 땅뇽스네 초르와델라 코르도 로이지 보내야 양나스 때 다나시야 초르와델라 섬중 초르와델라 아니 미기 넘버 헤바니 얘기 넘버 셰바바도 조심 두고 되기 아니 코르도 조비 고네 되네 죽스네 양 초르와 죽스네 미기 넘버 셰바게 미기 넘버 셰바기 왕도 제네 뒤에 렉발라 땐네 중외게 아니 코르도 중마 미케 코르도 중외게 초르와스 다나신 나나체 류이 스네 데레스네 죽 데데레라야 대둑 땅뇽스네 어딘데스네 초르와 섬중 초르와 생인데 어딘데 꼴라 망고지 약간 말 셰사레스 네 두셰 데라 양 섬중 두셰스라 세마르짐바 랑토키 율라 세마르짐바 두셰스네 데레스네 lep상 데 두셰데 아니 두셰게 칭이샤 두셰데라 양 미기 두데 레팔레 중에 두셰네 양 다나신기 지네 얘기 두데 레팔레 중에 두셰게 바돌라 조 되네 돈라 두시 바당 타니에 두시 바당 대양 쳔마나 집이 두시 당 쳔마 메베 두시 당 쳔부르 두시 충으로 두시 선에 야강라 망보지 쉬어서 어딘데 지니 디 심중 디니데 심중 단다데 군종아이 남네 서로와다 두시 시베게 디 니보데 공도 시신라 공도 야강라 시스바인사 다 야강도 시신사 다 야강도 시신라 대다 심중 인장 두제기 풍부로 미드때 록수 시베치로 다 심중 압중 나진 능라 지에 레당 말해서는 심중 압중 나진 능라 지에레스 군종아이 능라 유스 다 이나데 두제기 풍부 레당 말해서는 양 풍부가 있는 두제기 풍부 레당 말해서는 데 두제기 풍부라 미드때 되게 말해서 디니드니 소리 풍부당 두제기 풍부서 야 강라샤 록수 시베치로 세다 록 카카 전에 시바인스 원아 디 심중 압중 나진 능니 단다디 초르바다 두시니보데 원아 록수 시에급이 금생 강이나 스나 쪼바 쪼비 자와당 코르비 자와 코르와 데라 초르와 대와 동알 땅념 되는 용위권에 코르와게 자와데 대와라 차 미두발라 코르와 초르와 동알라 이당 땅념라 티묵 된데 제네 코르와라 주도 내가 지금 조직 주도 지긴 게 조직 초르와 데레스 디 임발 때는 코 록수 살포지니 야고지니 시바레스 아니 두시에스는 근데 밍라 두시에바 돈라 두시에바 쳔마다 제발라 두시에바 쳔마 메발라 두시에바 데데 쭈비 자와치 조체와 되니 지 파비큐 된조 되네 수수교 마이바 파비큐 된조 가시 되네 가능스나 따와라 줘봐 안에 따와 야고레스 따와 상고스는 두시에바 따와 님바스는 두시에바 좀다 야고레스는 두시에바 좀다 님바레스는 두시에바 된데게 쪼비 자와친 임발라 때네 쪼비 자와 니기 때네 네 자와 니기를 때네 초로하당 두신니보데 록수 셰비 치로스 된데 스물에도
So, the non-concurrent formations, such as acquisition and so forth, we will actually discuss later. So, acquisition would refer to the attainment of, for example, the individual liberation vows, like novice vows, or all these different kinds of vows, attaining the vows. Impermanence would be another non-concurrent formation referring to the momentariness of phenomena. But we will see that in detail and what this refers to below. First, we will talk about the concurrent formations, which are these mental states. And if we count them, the different concurrent formations or mental states, then there are 51 mental states, or 55 when the 5 views are counted individually. So we have the main mind, and along with that can come 51 different kinds of mental states. Within the list of 55 mental states, there is one that's called view. It's one of the 6 root afflictive emotions. And the view can be divided into 5 different wrong views. And if we count them separately, then we come up with a number of 55 mental states. If we all include them in the mental state of the view, then we have 51 mental states. And so whichever of these, and we will see that below in the discussion of the root afflictive emotions. So if we just say we have the 51 mental states, we can ask what are these 51 mental states, or what are these 55 mental states, but here we first go with the count of 51. The first 5 of these 51 mental states are the 5 ever-present mental states. The 5 ever-present mental states, they come along with every cognitive act. They come together with any moment of mind. So if any of the 6, whenever the 6 consciousnesses arise, whenever there's a moment of consciousness, these 5 mental states, they are also present. They're always present, they're ever present. And these 5 are attraction, sensation, perception, attention, and contact. So the 5 ever-present mental states always accompany the mind, the main minds. So whenever there is mind, that means that there's also always attraction, sensation, perception, attention, and contact. Now, in this list, we can see the ever-present mental states called sensation and perception. And these are exactly the sensations and perceptions that we have already discussed above. So sensation refers to the experience when coming into contact with an object that is either pleasurable, painful, or neutral. And so along with the arising of the main mind, then comes sensation, comes the experience of pleasure, pain, or neutrality. Or another way of breaking that down further would be to say that the encounter of sense objects and the arising of the main mind based on the 5 doors can be pleasurable. That would be then physical pleasure. An object of the mind that is experienced can be pleasurable. That would be then mental pleasure. Then we have the suffering that comes from encounter with the physical object. So the 5 doors experiencing something unpleasant, that would be then suffering or pain. And then and that would be the sensation that comes along with the respective physical or sense consciousnesses. Then that which comes along with the mind consciousness would then be mental pain, and if either the sense consciousness, like a neutral experience that comes along with the sense consciousnesses, or the mind consciousness would then be neutral sensation. So if you want to break it down even further, as we have seen, we can also identify each of the consciousnesses as accompanying sensations. So there's sensation that comes along with the eye consciousness, there's sensation that comes along with the ear consciousness, and so on, until the sensation that comes along with the mind consciousness. And so each of the accompanying sensations, the sensations that accompany the different kinds of consciousness, the 6 consciousnesses, then can be either pleasurable, painful, or neutral. And so we have seen in the presentation of the sensations, there are these many different ways of breaking down sensations, but there's always sensation that comes along with any point of mind. Perception, we saw also that we can break down the aggregate of perception in different ways. We said that there's just generally perception refers to the identification or the grasping of distinguishing features. So we can show this in light of its classifications, where there's the grasping to the distinguishing features of the object itself, so the meaning, or also the labels, the names. So perceiving the distinguishing features in regard to names. Then other subdivisions or many perceptions, like the perceptions with characteristics, the perceptions without characteristics, the lesser perceptions, the vast perceptions, immeasurable perceptions, and the perception of nothing whatsoever. So we saw that there are many ways to classify perceptions as well as that which grasps two distinguishing features, two specific characteristics of the object, and that also like the aggregate. So one of these different kinds of perceptions that we can distinguish always accompanies the cognitive acts. Any cognitive acts, any of the six consciousnesses. So these are exactly as we have explained them before, and are these two, sensation and perceptions, are these mental states? Do they belong to the count of 51 mental states? Yes, they are mental states. They accompany the main minds. And specifically, they are part of these ever-present mental states. But do they belong to the aggregate of formations? No, they do not belong to the aggregate of formations because they're already explained specifically. They're taken out of the aggregate of formation and have already received attention or explanation separately. So they are taking in the classification of aggregates. They're not part of the formations, but they're separate aggregates because of their specific relevance. But they are part of the mental states. If we enumerate the 51 mental states, they belong to the 51 mental states, and they belong to specifically the 5 ever-present mental states. Now, if they are mental states, why do we take them separately? Why are they not included in the aggregate of formations? It is because they are of specific relevance in terms of being the basis for debate and rebirth, or for being the root for samsara, being the root for samsaric experience. It's because of sensations that we develop the afflictive emotions, and therefore that leads to engagement which propels samsara. So when we experience the sensation of pleasure, then we get attached to the object that triggered that pleasure. When we experience pain, we develop aversion against the object that triggered that pain. And objects that are neutral in the sensation they trigger, they just propel ignorance. So therefore, sensations are the main route for developing the afflictive emotions and therefore propelling samsara. That's why they are so relevant for the discussion of the aggregates, that they're taking separately because if they have this specific function. And also perception, because perception, this whole grasping to distinguishing feature, is the basis for debate. Specifically here, it's the root for debate and quarreling and conceptualization of noble beings that renunciants that then debate on whether a view is a good view, a wrong view, a correct view, or an incorrect view, whether a philosophical tenet is correct or incorrect, or good or bad, whether a form of discipline is the supreme or not supreme type of discipline, and so on. So the perceptions, they are, and the grasping to these distinguishing features leads to all of these levels of debate, and therefore they're also taken separately. So because of these reasons, then sensations and perceptions are taking out of the, like, while they are mental states, they have this specific relevance, and therefore they're enumerated and explained separately outside of the aggregation of formations.
The rabjung nam tawa la zoba dang ane kimba nam chorwa deduk la zoba dende embe na ane lokso sheba os pungbo de zobe tsawas.
So they're taken separately. So they're taken separately because they're the basis for debate of lay people, householders, or renunciants, respectively. And my attendance question for today is: who is debating about sensations and perceptions? That's it.
Ne semba tang semba ni yulla yoshin juba des semba ni yulla yoshin juba des tenji gone meke de semba so tukos ne kunro ngai nang ne tangbo semba sheba de ne yuldang wangbo yulla sheba sun chokne ne yul kawa taula ne zindroi kaptela ne yul kawa la zimbi kaptela didan nyamdula semba singde kegyure semba singde yulla yoshin juba des yulla yoshin juba sheba de penna ji do khablim ki ane chak yugul tangwa na shen zine di na shen daw chi ne tene semba tegi lamsang chigla yul de la ane juk juk yures tete ta miki sheba de kewa tang zosim de kewa tang nyamdu la ane semjung tegi ane chi yul de la miki sunjar kyubi yul de la ane juk juk yures Ti tenji kone miki dute semba, nayu dute semba, nayi dute semba, che dute semba, luki dute semba, yiki dute semba sin. Ti tsosim chubu degi kordu la, semjung de semba sewa deyang, kordu nyamdu la yore sin sumande. Ti imbala tenji kone dene chuk, ta khasana tu chorwa la shayamba, miki dute rekpa le jungi chorwa, nayu dute rekpa le jungi chorwa sine semjung chorwa la shawa na shin chine semjung semba de la tanda di semba de la yang di dao sine tengi kone chuk yu sine sunga de do.
So we have covered now 1.34. The 5 ever-present mental states are attraction, sensation, perception, attention, and contact. Among these, sensation and perception have been explained above. Although they are mental states, they are not included within the aggregate of formation because they have been taught separately. And now we are at 1.35. Attraction describes the process of mind attention moving towards and becoming involved with an object. In terms of support, there are 6, such as attraction upon the meeting of the eye, i.e. between object, sense, faculty, and consciousness, and so forth. So when we talk about the 5 ever-present mental states. The first one of those is attraction, and that is with that which turns the main mind, towards that object. It's the attraction to the object that is based on the coming together of the I consciousness, the object, the faculty, and the cognition. So attraction here is when is a mental state that is always accompanying what any of the 6 types of main mind, and which moves the mind's attention towards that object, which makes the mind get involved with the object. So when the object and the faculty and cognition are present, and something appears, something is apprehended, then it is attraction that directs the attention of the mind towards that object. So it's that which moves the mind's attention to the specific object. And we can think of this in like with a magnet. It's like when there's a magnet and a piece of metal, of iron, and then the iron needle moves towards or points towards the magnet. The same way, like a magnet, magnet's function is then also the mental state of attraction, is what turns the mind and to the object and lets the mind engage with that object. And just as we have broken down sensations previously based on the 6 consciousnesses, or the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mind consciousness, here we can also identify the attraction based on the specific minds that they refer to. So there's the attraction that comes along with the I consciousness that functions to move the I consciousness towards apprehending the visible form, all the way up to the mind consciousness, directing the mind consciousness towards the mental object for the mind. And so in that sense, there are also these 6 subdivisions of attraction, if we look at them in terms of the support. So they are specific main minds that they accompany.
Rekpane sum dune wangbe gyurwa yongsu chopa chobi ten cheba was tanda de rekpa sheba de kundunga ina rekpa sheba de sum dune penna miki wangbo tang ani miki wangbo yudu gyurwe suk de tang ani miki sheba keje sheba di sum dune ani wangbo antela tene wangbo gyurwa yongsu chopa sedikala chorwa kiege ten chigire se wangbo gyurwa yongsu chopa shebade chorwa kiege ten ro chigido sne tene sungedo ne je rekpa sedikala wangbo ge gyurwa de yongsu chebe bone ten chorwa kiege ten chepas wangbo ge gyurwa yongsu chebe bone chorwa kiege ten chepas yullar semjung degi tene yullar regbe gone yullar regbe ge lega chige ge chare yulda ongbo sum chobala tene tene sheba kene sheba de da nyamdula ani yul mekshi yul de jube sok de la tene tupam rekbar jebas
Yiche di jela levgirame.
ale on naso ijene mikpala sem zimbades
Jela la maya. Jela la
naso
maya digite.
naso
Den kera lama so.
naso
Listen. Okay, so let's talk about contact now. Contact is the meeting together of the three: object, sense faculty, and consciousness, and the cognition of the faculties, particular event, and it supports sensation. We'll come back to attention after that. So contact is defined by the coming together of the form, which is the object for the eye consciousness or for the eye faculty, and then the faculty and the cognition. When all of these three are present, then contact, the mental state of contact occurs together with the cognition, with the main cognition, the main mind. So in terms of the eye consciousness, then when there's an object, a visible object, a visible form, and the eye faculty and a previous moment of cognition, then the eye consciousness arises, and that comes along with the contact of the form, the faculty, and the cognition. So that is the meeting, the coming together, or the contact between these three different parts. And that then is the basis, that contact is the support for sensation to happen. So when these three conditions are present, then the main mind arises, or the eye consciousness in our example, and along with that, then also sensation. So the support here for sensation is contact, and that always comes together with any of the cognitions, like particular events of cognition. So when these three things come together and a specific cognition comes about, this has to do with the contact between these three conditions. So contact is always present with any of the consciousnesses, and it is specifically also the support for sensation.
ila chebatene ane yulda ongbo sheba sum chone yuldela kechikma chigla rang tene lamsang chigla zin shago de la mingla ila chebas simzim badela
Regnet symbol.
ila chebade kaga ila chebade yulda ongbo sheba sum choyong de kapdela tene mikshi kegere mikshi de kewa dang nyamdula semjung ila cheba singinde yulde kechikma chikla lamsang rangla zin tegi yores oti mingla ila cheba singinde res.
And attention describes the process of the mind fixating upon the object concerned. So along with the arising of the consciousness, based on the coming together of object, faculty, and consciousness, then in that same moment also the mind focuses or fixates on that particular object. So that is called attention. So when the object faculty and cognition come together and the cognition arises, one of the consciousnesses arises, then alongside with that, there's also the mental state, which is attention, which is the aspect of focusing or fixating on the object of that momentary cognition.
디가 셈 탐제기 코르도 중에 군도시에 자고스 단다디 군동가 보대 아니 조심 된조다 셈 탐제기 냠도라 네 조비요와 냠도라 예베나 아니 군도세네 라바레스.
And on page 24 on the top it says, since these five accompany all cognitive acts, they are called ever-present. So the reason why we call them the ever-present mental states is that they come along with each and every moment of consciousness, with the main mind. Whenever there is main mind, any of the six types of consciousness, then along with that arise these five ever-present mental states. And so they're all with every cognition that happens, and therefore they're called ever-present.
네, 미기 넘버 7은 이기 넘버 12 받을라 셈바텐 조라 밍라 조셈레 되네 디 조셈디기 코르라 아니 디 냠둘라 딘 심중 납중 하시 되요레스 디 남니다 다링 디링데라 군동아세 납중 하시나니 당보 군동아세 다디디 슈사바레스 딘디 나지 배 차와 계자라고 그래도 다배 조셈 다 미기 셰바요는 미기 셰바기 냠둘라 다 심중데 여데레 디 갑데라 테네 지 미기 셰바 코롱기 냠둘라 초르와기 심중데 테네 다는 셈바기 지 군동만의 셈바 나긴데 뒤셰라 예라 제바 나긴데 렉바 나긴데 다데는 차우 딘데 요사레도 셰바 차우
So we have seen now that the main mind or the primary mind refers to the six types of consciousness, from the eye consciousness up to the mind consciousness. And along with that come these 51 mental states. And these are really something very subtle. Today specifically we also covered the first five, the five ever-present mental states. And these are really something really subtle that comes along with the topic of the main mind. So when, for example, the eye consciousness arises, then along with that, very subtle mental process, this very subtle cognitive aspect of the mental states comes along with it, with the main mind. And so those that always come along, these subtle cognitive processes or subtle mental processes that come along with every moment of cognition, of mind, are then attraction, sensation, perception, attention, and contact, the five ever-present mental states. But you have to really understand that this is something very subtle in the cognitive process. I'll stop here for today, and please do the dedication and the aspiration prayers together with me.
Jambal Baven Jidara Kemba Dang Kundo Samben De Han De Jen De Te Da Kunje Jezo Dalo Ji Kiwan De Da Tamje Rabdo Ngo Duzum Shekbe Yalwa Tamje Ji Ngowa Kanla Chondo Ngamba De Da Dagi Kebe Tsawa Indi Kun Kyang Sambo Chechir Rando Ngo Wara Ingi Sunam De Tangje Sepa Ni Tomne Nyebe Chanam Pamje Ni Kega Nache Balawa Chopa Yi Sebe Chole Dhruva Dhruva Sho Kewa Di Kewo Kun Sunam Yishe Chozo Shin Sunam Yishe Le Jungwa Tamba Kunye Dhovara Sho Lo Chusu Dhovara Chinje Labdo So Chö Lamdo Dhovara Chinje Labdo So Lam Chulba Silvara Chinje Labdo So Chulba Yeshin So Sharvara Chinje Labdo So Nasıl diyeceğim?
Altså, jeg er rigtig langt, så der var lidt hjemme.
Sandav James.
A few of you I will see later, and the rest I wish you a wonderful weekend, and I see you all on Monday.
Thank you. See you.
들어줘요.
Thank
Okay.
you.
The question?
Oh, I said it. I can repeat myself.
Okay, thank you.
What did I ask?
Who's debating?
Yes, who's debating? Who's debating about feeling and perceptions?
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Tuchina Jilajayong.
Chela Jeyong.